Welcome to the latest edition of First Day Kopites podcast, podcast for Liverpool fans in Delaware and friends of those Liverpool fans in Delaware. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we're also on YouTube. Welcome to the latest edition. This week, Sean and I are joined very nicely by Haitham, who is in Chicago, and Justin, who is in New York. Just if you're kind of missing the New York Mets cap, then if you're listening, if it's on audio, you'll be missing it. But that's what he's wearing to completely identify New York. We're recording this on April 19, 2021, after the Reds have just dropped points at Leeds. Maybe not the most important thing that happened in the last week, but here's what we're going to do. I thought, personal opinion, thought the Reds served up a pretty decent performance last Wednesday night, but it obviously wasn't enough to get through to the semi-finals of the Champions League. And we've got 6 games left to get in top 4, which may or may not be important, depending on the other parts of the conversation, because obviously the big news this week was the announcement about the European Super League. And I think what we want to do with that is to kind of get some balance, because it feels like a lot of people have jumped off a cliff in the last 24 hours about that announcement and the fact that Liverpool are involved. So let's start with the stuff we're supposed to care about, with the football. So I'm going to go around and let's reflect first on the Real Madrid game. I feel like there were some moments in the game which should have gone slightly different. Then things could have gone our way. As it was, we didn't even manage to score a goal, and I'm sure, as Sean will share with us, our expected goals wasn't actually that high either. So I'm going to start with Haitham, because he doesn't want to talk about expected goals.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about STEM. Some stats first. No, that's not my department. That's Sean. So, the Real Madrid game, first half, I thought pretty well. And then you could tell from the get-go that Real was not in it to, they wanted to play it safe. But I thought we had some pretty good chances. Again, the finishing piece or the finishing part of our game is just, and this, I guess, carried over to today's match. Our finishing was just, I don't know what it is. It's just going from the year before last or the season before last to the last season, and just reflecting on our finishing from back then versus now. And I understand, so many things have happened, injuries and all of that stuff, but finishing is something that is, it's part of the players' tools, and for it to drastically fall off, I just, I'm not comprehending that. I know Salah is still scoring goals, but at the same time, some of his misses are just head scratchers for me. But overall, it's just like I said earlier, I'm just watching the matches at this point, and I get frustrated. I got frustrated in the second half of the Real game, just because we didn't create anything. We just lacked ideas, and I'm not going to talk about today's match yet, but I think it's pretty much going to be the same language around it.
So there were definitely sliding doors moments in the Real game. The chance Salah had after, was it 2 minutes? I think that would have made a big difference. Maybe we'll go and touch on crowds before we're done with this. But Justin, what was your take on the Real match?
I think the first half we were a bit all over them. I think it died in the second half, and obviously that's what tends to happen when you give a team, like they probably obviously map the game out as far as, if we can go this long holding it out, we can start, really sinking back into our area and just, absorbing what they have. They have still a bunch of very good midfielders and defenders who can do that. So, they got their tactics pretty much spot on, except for one thing. If Ginny or Salah score in the first half, it's a very different game. They didn't, and it wasn't. basically. Well, that's the problem with giving yourself, these huge gaps with also no crowd. Which, because I think if that game is at Anfield, that's actually full. Real are going to be a lot ropier. There's something, I think there's absolutely something to that. The cop can actually suck the ball in, but I don't know, we're going through one of these stretches where there just seems to be no ruthlessness in the side. There's kind of just jagged energy where every single one of the players is, because we still have a lot of very good players, and they're all capable of playing really well. It just doesn't feel like any one of them is capable. It just doesn't feel like they're right now capable of putting consistent performances together. Or if one player in the midfield plays well in a game, one of the other people that they're playing with in the midfield has a stinker, right? And Real, I think, kind of had that feeling because we were really good in midfield. Defensively, we weren't really bothered. And Bobby and Sadio Mane were just awful. Salah wasn't much better, but Mane and Firmino they couldn't find any space to play in where they, really had a chance to threaten Real Madrid after like maybe the first 5 minutes of the game. And if it's if two of our front three are going to be bad when we need 2 goals, we're not going to get them.
Yeah, I actually get a slightly different view, but I thought Mane tailed off, unfortunately, in the game. But I actually thought Firmino was pretty bright, and maybe we'll come and talk about whose star is rising and who is not in a kind of, as we wrap this whole section up. But Sean, just a final word on your take on the Real Madrid game. I'm trying to remember now. It seems like an eternity ago when I was looking at messages around the game. It seemed like there were a lot of them, but I can't remember what they said.
Yeah, me neither. And I'm sure I sent a lot of them. Yeah, I think if Salah makes that, scores that goal in the second minute, it's a totally different game. And I think if the fans are in the stadium, it's a totally different game. But neither of those things happened. And to Justin's point, I think Salah maybe hasn't been as sharp the last couple of games, but I think he's kind of carried our attack for the last 3 months, So I think it's harsh to be overly critical of him either. It's just it's just one of those things that just didn't come together. I think, and Real Madrid, like, they were happy to just sit back and allow us to try to break them down, and we couldn't do it, especially in the second half. I think personally, I think moving Fabinho back hurt us out of the midfield. That's just my take. I know others probably don't agree with that, but I think that tactically was, I think that hurt us more than it helped us. And we just looked entirely toothless after we made that move. Around the 60th minute on, we couldn't create anything. I mean, we had some good chances. I think some fans were like overrating the quality of those chances, but we did have some good chances. There was one from Ginny, 2 others. I think Mane had one. Milner had a pretty good chance early on. But other than that early Salah chance, none of them were like great chances, And that's kind of been the problem for the last, 3-4 months. We haven't been able to create enough of those clear-cut chances. And, so it was just kind of a continuation of that. But I think overall we did play much, much better than we did in the first leg. So it was an improvement. But, obviously wasn't good enough. So.
Yeah. There's probably a lot to say, but I do recall kind of one interaction I had with one of my friends in Liverpool, and I think you're right about the subs. They sucked the air out of whatever was going on. Before they came on, it did feel like Real were a little rattled, and if had there been a crowd, I think that would have made a huge difference. I want to move on from the Real game because I sense there's a bigger topic looming out there. But let's just quick review on the Leeds game. I felt like at halftime it was a question of like how many were we going to score in the second half, but second half didn't really turn out that way. Don't know if that was your perspective, Haitham, but where did you?
Absolutely. I mean, halftime, you know, first of all, I was just praying. Well, I don't pray, but hoping that they would score in the first half. This was the first time they scored in the first half, and I don't know how long. I just don't remember the last time they scored in the first half.
Yeah.
So when that came in, you know, I was pretty happy about it, and I was like, you know, there might be one or two more in the second half, and just seeing how they exploited the spaces, you know, within Leeds, you know, I was like, okay, you know, the club is going to talk to them about, you know, exploiting those spaces more. But they came back and for I think the first 5 minutes they had you know, some pretty decent chances. But again, it just felt like, you know, like I said, deja vu and the second half of Real Madrid all over. And then actually Leeds took over. And at that point, you know, it was just, okay, when is Leeds going to score? You know, that was, and that was the whole mindset of mine. Pretty much, you know, the beginning of the half of the second half. So, and then Allison saved us, you know, a couple of times, but you could feel that Leeds was going to score because they're just that type of team. Once they get into that type of form, they end up scoring. And I just thought that we were not doing anything. We were giving balls away. I have no idea. Again, I don't like to criticize players, but Genie was not doing anything. And again, Sean keeps talking about moving Fabinho to the back, and you know, Genie, I suppose, was playing the six, but it was just, you know, I can't remember hearing his name more than a couple of times. But again, just to end my comment, it was so frustrating. And again, it's just like, you know, if we make Champions League, fine. If we don't, fine. It's just a little up in the air at this point. And even if we make it, I'm sure we're going to talk about it in the next segment. You know, it's not clear if we're going to play or not, but
Yeah.
you know,
it was a little weird from my perspective that it felt like the major threat had actually passed by the time Leeds did actually score. That it felt like they had a glut of opportunities, and then were fine. And then the corner came, and I'm thinking to myself, wouldn't it be good if Nat Phillips was playing in this one? I shouldn't think those thoughts, because clearly, had he been there, I think we might have cleared the ball away and may have snuck out with a win. I know before we started recording, Justin, you said you didn't feel much about this game, but any kind of thoughts that you're having now?
I mean, there were some things that I think I saw that were kind of obvious. Like something Haitham called out was around Gini Wijnaldum, right? I think he had like only 14 passes the entire match. Some pitifully low number from a central midfielder, especially one whose job is to retain possession, because that's basically what his role is in possession. So like when you have a central midfielder who's completing that few passes, it means he's having no influence on the game whatsoever, because he's not exactly a destroyer or an attacker. That said, I think it was pretty obvious that it was tactical. We took a lead, and then we're just like, okay, let's sit back and catch them on the counter. And to be honest, even though Leeds absolutely dominated us in that half, like you have two gilt-edged chances, really three gilt-edged chances to win the game anyway. You have, I mean, the hardest of the three is Ox in stoppage time, but even then, he's a professional footballer who's played for a Champions League, Premier League, and now Super League team. He can control the ball and finish that, as well as also just the ball over the top from Thiago to Salah, which was absolutely incredible. Thiago actually had a very especially good first half, but was decent in creating today. Salah should bury that, and we've seen him score that type of goal before, almost a carbon copy of how he scores against United in last January at Anfield, as well also as when we had a 3-on-2 with Robertson carrying the ball, he could have played either Jota or Salah, and Robertson's extremely heavy touch to Jota, which really just ended up in Meslier's hands. That was really, I mean, we should have scored one of those three opportunities. If we scored the second two that I mentioned, either the Robertson overpassed ball or Salah finishes that one, it's 2-0 at that point in time. The game is over, and a game that had no energy and no life, just flutters to a lifeless death instead of, instead of a 1-1 draw where not a single person watching this game ends up happy.
Well, I guess some people who are hating us right now might be happy that we didn't win. Maybe that's the.
Yeah, but they probably wanted us to lose. Like the only people who, like, because I mean, like Leeds, what do they do at that point? They draw even with Arsenal in 10th. Like, this is an unsatisfactory ending for everybody involved. The bad guy doesn't win. The good guy doesn't win. I'm not sure who the good guy. I'm not sure. I mean, to quote Peep Show, are we the baddies?
Feels like, but let's just finish off. Last comment on today's game, Sean. Was it all Genie's fault? No, I'm not. I don't think you were saying that, but it clearly wasn't that influential. Did think Thiago played pretty well. I personally thought Firmino had probably a better game for us than he's had in a while. But your take?
Yeah, I thought I thought it looked like our midfield sort of ran out of gas around 60 or 65 minutes. And my take was that either of those subs were pre-planned and they just went with it, or Klopp didn't trust anyone on the bench to come in, which is, I guess I'm kind of leaning towards the second, which is kind of sad. I don't know what the situation is with Nabi now, but he's just like sitting there on the bench, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, to me, at least around 65 minutes, Ginny and Milner both looked just gassed. I mean, they did not look like they had anything left, and we didn't make any subs in the midfield. And I don't know. I mean, that kind of stood out to me. I think just so many of our players right now have been overplayed this season, and they just look tired. I think you could see some of that midweek too. And I think you probably, you can't say it's 100% the cause, but Robbo's touch on that break, I mean, I got to think some of that's because he's been way overplayed, and he's looked gassed for weeks now. And Klopp just doesn't trust, Tsimikas and some of the other players to bring them on. So that was kind of my take, and it just seemed like we kind of fizzled out in the second half. It was kind of sad, but
It seems to fit the mood, actually, based on all the stuff that's gone on before the game about the European Super League. But one final question about the football. It strikes me that certain people's reputations have kind of taken a different turn in the last few weeks. And maybe this is just me, but I'll give it a start. But it does strike me that Kabak actually doesn't look a bad player. And certainly Klopp was making noises about signing him. And it kind of feels like he's sort of come from people at the beginning of and being here. It's like, we'll never buy him, to, it's very likely. And then it kind of in the opposite direction. And I don't know how dramatic this is, but Jota has not looked quite the same player in the last 3 or 4 games, to my perspective. And I'm kind of wondering whether that's him either just, tired, injured, or is that some reversion to mean in terms of his Wolves numbers. So I don't know, Haitham, you got any thoughts about whose stock is on the rise and who is perhaps not?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with Kabak and Phillips too. And I bet a lot of what's happening with their form, both of them, is just the fact that they're playing next to each other more than one game or whatever. As we know, center halves, they need that pairing, that relationship for them to flourish. And I think just the fact that they had that chance to play alongside each other is actually boosting their individual performances. With regard to Jota, I just I might have mentioned this to you guys before, but I feel like he was gone for a while, injured, and then he came back and he's playing all these matches with the national team and with Liverpool, and I don't, I thought he had a good game today. Yeah, he did not score, but the pass for the first goal, he had that header from the corner, almost scored. Yes, that's not what we're used to, when he was scoring, but I don't see anything, like what's going on with Mane, just the inconsistencies of, for example, of Genie. But yeah, and Firmino, he's still, one day he plays well, still not scoring, but one day he has influence, the other day he's just there. And again, it just goes back to the form of the whole team. I think it's not in a good place. Let's not kid each other.
Yeah. So Justin, any thoughts on who's rising and who is probably going to be glad to see the end of the season? I think you're on mute, actually.
Rising, definitely Kabak. I would say Jota was mostly fine today. I think people need to remember he's still relatively young in football in terms. He's only 24, so he's not yet at a point in time where he's peaking. And also, I definitely think that being dropped into an attack where, again, as we mentioned earlier, large portions of it have been misfiring all season. It makes it harder because we saw him coming against Arsenal and played really, really well. But then since then, it's been playing. I don't think he's played in the same. It's been the same 4 attackers rotating, but I don't think he's played in the same 3 with the same tactical roles repetitively, which is what you really need to do to develop an understanding, which is, I think, I'm not worried about him. I could see where a 24-year-old tails off. It's also, he wasn't going to score every 55 minutes. That's better than prime Messi level scoring. So, you have to kind of take into account the fact that is going to cool down. It's unsustainably hot. I mean, it happens to young players. You see Mason Greenwood this year for United go from basically looking like everything he hit last year was going into not finishing anything until this weekend where he needed a bunch of deflections. But this is not a Manchester United podcast, so I digress. I will say that today it was actually nice to see Alisson Becker playing, back to his best, because he's been a player who's been definitely going, understandably so with what's gone on with both this crazy season, the fact that he's had on and off injuries, and then also the untimely death of his father. It was just good to see him go out and put together hey, I'm the best goalkeeper in the world performance. Maybe he could have done a little bit more on that on the corner, but that's also a zone where you'd think actually maybe one of your center backs is actually going to get to the ball. And that's probably just me being harsh to even say that, because he was, all things considered, the best of the 11 players we put out there today against Leeds.
Yeah. So I'm not one of those dinosaurs who's says you need to man-to-man mark. This zonal marking doesn't work. But when zonal marking breaks down, which I think it did there, because there was no one blocking that guy's run. So you could say, why didn't Kabak cover him?
Yeah.
But there was nobody. He ran, and Kabak was the first thing he hit.
I mean, the player who looked like he should have been in that zone was Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. And once again, what are you going to expect out of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain when he defends? This is probably the first corner he's probably had to defend on a field in, I don't know, months, probably a year. What do you expect out of that?
Yeah, probably since the West Ham game where they conceded a goal from a corner where his man scored. Yeah. So
that's last February.
No, it was this year.
Oh, this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he came on at the end of the game. We were.
Yeah.
I think it was 3-0.
I forgot about that. Yeah. So 4 months. Yeah. So again, the whole point being, we're getting off the point of he probably hasn't had to defend a lot of corners in any capacity in a long time, and it shows.
Yeah, for sure. Last word on this, Sean.
I'd also just add on their goal. Ginny also just didn't even attempt to jump for the ball. If you go back and watch it, I'm not sure if he could have gotten it, but he could have challenged for it. And I'm not even trying to be overly critical of Ginny. I think he's just played way too much. There are a few players right now for us that are just, they're tired and they're understood. I can sympathize with them. I understand why they'd be tired. They've played too many games in too short a period of time. And it pains me to ever be critical of Klopp, but I just think there are some things he hasn't gotten quite right recently. It's just been an odd season. Everything seems off. I actually thought Jota played pretty well today. I agree with you. Recently, in the last few games, particularly against Madrid, he seemed to just disappear. I thought in the first leg against Madrid he was really bad, and nobody really pointed it out. But he was awful in that game if you go back and watch it. But today I thought he was really good. I mean, the pass for the first goal was awesome. And he made another pass at one point in the second half that, could have created something. And then, like Haitham was saying, he came close to kind of scoring on that corner. So, and like Justin was saying, I mean, he was scoring at a ridiculous rate. You can't expect that to continue. But actually, I thought he bounced back pretty well today, and it was good to see Allison bounce back a little bit. I'll give Trent a shout too, though. I think Trent is like, despite all this nonsense of the national team, he's like totally back on form. He was like missing for most of the year, and I don't know if it was COVID or what, but it's like he's been back to the Trent that we know and love the last month or two. I thought I saw some of the TV and other people gave Casemiro the man of the match in the match last week, which it's hard to argue against. But I thought Trent really deserved it, especially for us. I thought he was great. So
yeah,
it's good to kind of see him back there too. And the criticism of his defending too, I don't even want to get into, but that's gone way overboard. In my view, he should stay at right back for everybody that's questioning that.
Couple of things then. Obviously, our problem was Gareth Southgate wasn't in Madrid because every other game he showed up to, Trent has been pretty good. You persuaded me around Jota. There were certainly good contributions today. I guess the thing I was noticing though was the header he missed was the kind of thing he'd been scoring. That was probably in my mind.
Yeah, I think so. Just one last comment about Jota. I think it's our expectations that are fueling some of the notions that he's not playing well. I mean, like you guys said, 55 a goal every 55 minutes. And he came in and he built these expectations of his in our minds, and now expecting to do that on a constant basis. I think that's more of it. But like Sean said, and I said it earlier, he really had a great game. He just didn't score today. That's all.
Yeah, and there was a lot of misfiring going on around him for sure.
Right.
Yeah, there's something he does that I think that Salah and Mane are doing when they're going right, which they haven't been doing enough of this season, which is they, looking to try to get on the end of something rather than having to do it all yourself, which is something that Jota does do.
Mhm.
And I mean, look, we've been at our best in the past 2 seasons when you have either Trent swinging a ball like the early cross to Sadio Mane or Robbo swinging the early cross to Salah. We haven't had that on at all season, probably because it's been figured out. So having another player who gives defenses something else to think about, which is what Jota does, and he moves differently, it's what we need. I mean, I still don't think it obviates the need to not have like a pure in the box finishing number 9 at some point, because that's something that probably would, if we had one this season, we're probably 6 to 9 points better at this exact moment.
Yeah, well, that we'll never know. And maybe, well, anyway, we could talk about all sorts of things, couldn't we? Next season, signings, but we're going to spend the last segment of the show. Actually, did want to do one quick thing. We've had quite a few people on the show we've talked about Hillsborough, who were at Hillsborough. Did want to kind of recall that it was the 32nd anniversary last week, and that the family support group is disbanding. If you haven't seen that, that's probably worth a whole topic on itself on a different show. But clearly, European Super League with the very amateurish looking logo, says me, announced yesterday, and indeed Liverpool announced yesterday that they were going to be part of European Super League. Overwhelmingly, everything I've read, and I'd be interested to kind of get your sense, it has been negative about it. Part of me believes that some of that negativity is definitely full of self-interest. I'm thinking Sky, I'm thinking UEFA, I'm thinking Premier League. But what's your take on it, and what's the in your mind, what's the case for and against And I'll start with you, Haitham. For and against the Super League, and it's okay to say I don't know enough about it.
Yeah, so I was in that stage right after the news came out. I didn't know enough about it, and to be honest, I did not really care. And I was, if you guys have looked at the messages, I was asking. I think I asked Justin because Justin was feeling pretty down about it. Just why, just to know, some of the reasons. But I did some research and what's behind it, and obviously it's the money. It's just a few rich owners that want to get richer. Stomping on everything in their paths. But looking at it from another angle, and the whole concept of the pyramid, for example, in England, and the Premier League, the Championship, all the tiers, and how money funnels down to the lower leagues. It's basically, if you want to compare it to the trickle down economics that certain people talk about, that's what's happened there. And that's another group that's going to get affected tremendously if those 6 teams leave and create their own thing. The other piece of it is the players. If they stay in those leagues, those 6 teams, basically the players, there's a potential that they're going to have more games to play, which is, we know it's something that our coach has been complaining a lot about, just the amount of games. And if they get banned, they're not going to be able to play for their countries and all of that stuff. And again, like what we heard today, no one, the people that actually do the work, players, staff, coaches, no one knew anything about this. No one was consulted. They're just like us, hearing the rumors in the past, and now they're confronted with the possibility. Again, to me, it seems like it's an autocracy and a dictatorship, and that's just by default something that I'm not a big fan of. So you put all those together, and then you make up your mind about it, and after looking at all of those, I'm not in favor of it. But at the same time, it's not. I feel like the only thing that I can control is me going to games, contributing to it, or buying TV subscriptions to watch those games if that league is formed. So that's the only thing I have control over. But I have no other control over anything, but just to say, hey, I don't agree with this.
So there's probably quite a lot of debate about where some of the criticism has come from, and I'm sure Justin will get into this. But UEFA clearly are upset because they're trying to supersede the Champions League, and as I read somewhere, it's not going to be a great sell for TV if Galatasaray are playing, Zurich Grasshoppers in the semi-final of the Champions League, because all the big name teams are somewhere else.
Slavia Praha.
Yeah.
Well, monkey chance in the stands. How about that?
Yeah. So I don't. Did you share this? Somebody said, wouldn't it have been nice if UEFA had got this upset about racism?
Bamford said it after the match today.
Yeah. Oh, he did?
In his post-match interview, Pat Bamford, when he was asked about the Super League, because I have no idea why they'd ask a Leeds player about the Super League, his comment was, I wish people would get this affected when they were talking about kicking racism out of the game. Why are we only this pissed off when we're talking about the owners' wallets? Which, fair play.
Yeah.
I bet that went down well on Sky.
And I'm paraphrasing. I'm not giving the exact quote, but it's to that extent. It's to that. Yeah.
So clearly Sky have a vested interest in the status quo. So something that damages their brand. Do we really think the Premier League are going to kick out the 16?
No, they're not, because if you think about it, there's a few angles here, and I'll try to allow some room for commentary in the middle. There's a few things that people need to take into account, right? So the first thing is, how is this going to affect domestic play? If they try to kick the 6 out, or just put them to like later, or, like what'll happen is the Premier League will turn into what the Premier League did to the English Cup competitions, right? Because basically, like, Paul, when you were growing up, the FA Cup was a huge thing.
Yeah.
Yes, it was it was the showpiece day of the calendar for English football. Right now, what is it? It's something that's nice for a team that's not in the like the only one of the big six that I think would be genuinely enthusiastic about winning the FA Cup as on a standalone is Spurs, because Spurs have won two things since 1962. The only reason, and Spurs' inclusion in this gets to the heart of it, right?
Yeah.
They have a huge stadium. They have a huge new stadium, and they're in London, and they make a lot of money.
Yeah.
This is about the 6 teams in the Premier League not wanting to share TV money with, like you said, Galatasaray or Zurich Grasshoppers, right? That's an issue and they don't trust UEFA to remediate it. So they're going out on their own. So it's one greedy, corrupt party against the other. And the part about this is that's like where nobody should get like too caught up in some of the moral hand wringing about this, because all of the people with an actual like financial interest in this, none of them are the good guy. There is no good guy. It's one set of oligarchs versus another set of oligarchs, right? So there's no good guy there. The TV companies in this too. Once again, the only reason that Sky would be upset is because of the fact that fueling the rise of the Premier League, a thing that they did, and having a European Super League, like, basically it's the whole reaping versus sowing thing. You reap what you sow, and that's what Sky hates about it. The part about it though that gets me is going to be, and this is really, really bothersome to me, is the way in which the league is going to be constructed. So it's 12 teams now. They're trying to get 3 more. It's obvious that the 3 more teams that they were trying to get are probably Dortmund, PSG, and Bayern. Yeah. All 3 of whom are a no-go at the moment. And then adding 5 teams every single year to the competition, like, in a kind of you can be promoted or relegated to this somehow. But otherwise, you're setting up a closed shop. And I really don't like that, because, until today, this game felt like it had some real big top 4 consequence where, okay, the Champions League is still something to play for. Getting into Europe because getting into Europe and getting to the Europa League for a mid-table side is still an accomplishment, right? Teams want to go play against other teams and open up different competitions. And now basically what you're doing is, if this Super League comes, UEFA is not all of a sudden going to abandon having a Champions League. They're not going to abandon having Europa League. It's just that the level of those competitions are going to go down, and it's going to mean that people aren't going to pour money into it, and it's going to kill the football structure in a lot of places. Yeah. It's bad for the game, and it's also going to do the thing that we do in American sports, which is something that really bothers me at the moment. And I'll use the NBA for example. In the NBA, if you don't think you have a chance to win, mm-hmm. or a shot, or maybe the best you could do is getting into the 8th spot, into the 8th seed in your conference. If that's the best you can do, the way the NBA has evolved is people have reasoned it's better to just lose out as much as you can, tank, and take the draft pick, right? This is going to do that. What's the penalty to finishing 19th or 20th in the Super League if you're Arsenal or Spurs? Or Liverpool. We could do that. What's the penalty? There's nothing. You do that in the Premier League right now. You go down elite. You go down to the championship.
So a few things. We don't know the details yet. So people have said, well, it'll siphon off money from all the kinds of football. I don't know how true that is.
We don't. It's a hypothesis, but based on how football has gone over the last 30 years, it feels like a pretty sound one.
It would be interesting to see how much UEFA has been funneling to grassroots football, because I suspect they've probably got a pretty healthy bank balance. And because the prizes, at least up to recently, the Champions League were nowhere near as big as the prizes for Premier League, right?
No.
So there's clearly a belief amongst those clubs that there's more money there that UEFA are holding on to in some form or other.
There absolutely is. And then there's also, I mean, there's an easy way to kind of also exemplify this. If you look at the tickets at the Wanda Metropolitano for the 2019 Champions League final, it was something like maybe 30% of the tickets were allotted to supporters of both Liverpool and Spurs, and something around the rest was all corporate. It was basically all corporate sponsorship tickets.
Yeah.
And if that feels like that's the way that UEFA is going, that's going to be the way the Super League's going too. I mean, again, if you've watched a Super Bowl, that's the way that works too, right? We're getting to a point where, like, you know, this is less about athletic competition than it is about branding.
Yeah.
These are franchises. They're at a certain point, they're no longer connected to the roots of the city that they're from and the culture that they came into, because they're just, you know, too rich and too abstracted from them.
The most disturbing thing I saw in one of the pieces today was that although Liverpool were not one of the instigators, it said, this piece, they were one of 3 American owners who found the idea of an NFL structure very appealing. I did find that troubling, because that speaks exactly to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I'm a fan of an NFL team, right? Because I'm an American who grew up watching football. But, like, as far as pro sports leagues, like, I do not enjoy the NFL. The product is not great. They really pay lip service to the fan experience. They pay lip service to the, you know, to what's in the best interest of their players. And as far as, like, you know, what they are societally, they try to be everything to everyone, which when you try to do that, you end up being nothing to anybody.
So that's a no vote then.
It's a no vote. I'm not a fan of this, right? I don't think that. I think that if you're gonna, I don't think that the Champions League needs a ton of reform. You know what? The problem with even though the Champions League suffers from still some of the same closed club issues that there are ways to get into it. And you've seen teams like, one of the best stories in the Champions League in the past few years is Atalanta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Becoming a team that's, you know, they're the 10th richest club in Italy, a league that's had real financial troubles, and they don't spend a ton on players. And they found an idiosyncratic way of playing that catches everybody out by surprise. And they rode it to a Champions League quarterfinal, and then to qualify and then to a round of 16 the next season, right? You're going to lose that. That's not something that's not something we're going to get to see again. That's part of like the joy and the comfort of the Champions League, is that you do see weird things. You can go see Porto win. I mean, look, it hasn't happened in a while, but Porto winning the 2004 Champions League, that was totally unexpected. And we're gonna lose that. We're gonna miss that, maybe, and it's gonna bother me. And I just think that the competitions themselves aren't broken, so they don't need to be fixed. If the clubs want to make a point about how money is allocated through these competitions, there is a way to do this that doesn't alienate football fans of these clubs and every other club. Because, like, we're going to be the club that we're going to be one of those clubs now that everybody hates, even though we always have been. But it used to be because of our history and our success, and now it's going to be because we tried to shiv all of them in the back, and it doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah. The few things to say. The Porto success, and I think there is. I thought one of the comments I heard from the Premier League, which I thought was completely disingenuous, was that these clubs would be ruining the chance for every team to kind of have a crack at the title. And it's like, have you looked at who's won that thing? In the last 20 years, and certainly Porto was pre-PSG, Man City, Chelsea, or at least before the big injection of money into Chelsea. So I do think that de facto, we've already kind of ended up with a group of people, a group of teams from which you will choose the winners of these European competitions, or the Champions League at least, because one or other of them's going to have the resources to win. So, and I know, Sean, you had messaged a couple of times on some things related to, like, the failure of financial fair play being a trigger for certainly the Spanish teams, that they've been concerned about. Man City, PSG in particular, their money.
I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but my sense is that has to have some, that has to have impacted this in some way. I mean, when City won their legal ruling and financial fair play last year, it's meaningless. So, in the past, Chelsea and others have at least pretended to adhere the financial fair play rules. There's none of that anymore. So there's nothing protecting all these established clubs, and I use the example, I looked at La Liga and looked at where the teams were located, and Cadiz is in a nice place and they're in mid-table now. So why can't Jeff Bezos just go buy Cadiz for 100 million and pump a whole lot of money into him for 3 or 4 years and then finish, win the league or finish top 2 or 3? And that's, I think that's at least part of what these clubs are looking at now. In addition to that, there are all the other things that were mentioned. It's like UEFA being corrupt.
Allegedly,
they're not getting their fair share of the revenue. All the big clubs. I mean, the reason that people watch these games is because they want to see the best players play and they want to see the best teams play. It's got nothing to do with like the Premier League or UEFA objectively. It's about watching these teams play, basically, for most fans. I hate it. I'm with Justin in that sense. Like it, I don't know. It's sort of made me. I don't know. I'm still sort of sorting it out for myself, but in general, I don't like it. I really hate this idea. I hate how all this is sorting out. But at the same time, if I put myself in the shoes of somebody that's managing one of these clubs, I totally understand why they'd want to do this. I mean, they're protecting their own interests. And if UEFA is not going to do that, then they're going to say, screw you, UEFA. We're splitting off. I mean, I think that's essentially what's happening here. I don't buy any of these threats from the Premier League or FIFA that they're going to ban people. The Premier League's not going to ban the top 6 clubs. Those people, they love their authority way too much to ever do anything like that. So I think it's basically just a fight between a lot of these big clubs and UEFA, and I don't know how it'll shake out. Part of me thinks that they'll come to some agreement in the near term, and then we'll just revisit this in another 3 or 4 years. So
I'd like to put my bias against La Liga in display at this point, because you mentioned them, Sean, and a team with a contract worth $1 billion just for one player does not have to say anything about money or where money goes or Jeff Bezos or whatever. So, yeah.
So I did see some background which suggested that Real and Barcelona are very early on involved because not only they're concerned about the petrodollars, but they're also basically almost bankrupt. So this would kind of bankroll them for a while. I also saw somebody ask the question of, well, why is City and Chelsea supporting this? And apparently they're I don't know, lukewarm is probably not the right word, but they're not the advocates, but they figure if they get left out, then their empires will be worth less. So
for City in particular, City, and this is where I'm shocked about PSG, but I guess PSG basically is just trying to find any like less so. But for City, it's effectively if they get taken in as part of the the established great clubs of Europe. That's all Sheikh Mansour really wants. That's why he wants to win the Champions League so badly, right? He wants that acceptance on the global stage that the victory in sport can give, right? Because this is the problem with having sovereign states owning interests in teams. They are using it like explicitly for political purposes. Like, and I'm not a person who sits there and thinks that like politics need to be left out of sports because everything has an inherent politic built into it. But in that particular case, you don't get any more nail on the head than, if I join this club of multinational corporations led by Americans, and they're taking the prestigious old guard of European football into this new elite super league. There's my acceptance. It does everything that he would want from winning a Champions League.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on though. In terms of politics, I read earlier today that Boris Johnson's going to do everything he possibly can to stop this from happening. So we have him to rely on.
They couldn't find a Super League administrator educated at Eton.
Since when did he care about football? Anyway, that's we're. I think we're almost out of time. I feel like we should have a last word somewhere. Okay, my last word today is going to be my most enjoyable moment actually of today's game, kind of lightening up just a little, was Jurgen Klopp sitting on his own bucket. I don't know if you saw that, but or maybe you. So based on the expressions, nobody took as much pleasure from that as me. I'm not sure whether Bielsa would have regarded it as an insult, but hopefully it was done in terms of admiration. We're going to leave it there. Haitham, Justin, Sean, thanks so much for joining us this week. I'm sure we're going to talk more about the European Super League going forward. And maybe we'll talk about a couple of other topics that excite our interest, perhaps a bit more than this does right now. Thanks, everyone.